Hi, this is session 1F, Research and Education. I'm your chair, Ellyn Lester, and we will be in seminar room F. We're going to get started now. We're just a couple minutes in. Our first presentation is a critical analysis of collaborative and disruptive digital-driven built environment education. So I'm going to go ahead and get started now, and then we'll have questions after.
Everybody, I'm Henning Grosse. I live and work in Berlin, Germany, and I want to share my experiences teaching a module on teamwork and project management. This module is part of a master's degree course on green building design here in Berlin at the Beuth University. So first, I want to give you a short overview what my presentation is about. Well, I will give you some background information about the students, the course, and the module. Then I will tell you how I collected my material for the research. Then I'll present my results on journal writing and action research. And finally, give you a reflection about the difficulties and the benefits of it. So here I am. I won't use many presentations, so you will see my face quite a long time. To the background. This is a master's level course on sustainable building design. The course resembles predominantly around a design project. The students from different backgrounds have to work in teams and to develop an integrated design, which includes architecture, structural engineering, building equipment. And it all culminates in a final presentation of the project. The students hold a bachelor's degree either in architecture, civil engineering, building equipment, or facility management, something similar. So one of my first tasks is to assign them into interdisciplinary teams. The university went online last year in April. So this circumstance is not the scope of my paper, but it has an influence. So due to the pandemic, I had to redesign the module. My first idea was I'll try to get them together and get their project work up and running. So my idea was the lecture should be helpful for the project, less abstract, project focused, get students engaged, and most of all, I want to open their minds to interpersonal skills. I knew I could only scratch the surface of project management. Hence, I started to train them to learn from experiences. So I used their project as a vehicle to clarify aims, brainstorm, order and structure tasks, and keep them on track to get their project running. So the idea behind the lecture was the following. For the first semester, they had to plan their project. So think about the necessary steps, order them, create a schedule, and then keep on track. And the action research went in when their project was running. They had to observe and adjust, find problems, and fix the problems with action research. At the same time, I asked them to write a diary or a journal about their experiences to understand better what was going on. For the second semester, I asked them to identify themes or problems of interest that they wanted to investigate. So they had experiences from the first semester and should explore these problems they encountered in the second semester. So they had to select 2 or 3 themes and write a short research proposal for it. And they explored the questions using extra research, and I supported them in their efforts. Regarding the collection of data or material, I did it in 3 different ways. So first, I wrote field notes. I kept sort of a diary about the meetings I had with students and the lecturers. Second, I assessed their writings. So what they handed in for the feedback sessions and their final assignments. And the third way I collected data was that I met with them for informal conversations via Microsoft Teams. So we had, I had with some students conversation about 1.5 hours, and they provided me quite a lot of insight into how they understood the lectures. So to the results, or how it all unfolded. Setting up the project plan with the students worked quite well. They defined the purpose of their project, they envisioned how it looked like in the end, and they had principles for the project. They designed a schedule, and so they saw the immediate value in it. And the students were very much focused on design and what the project should look like, what technical features, what sustainability criteria they want to meet, and what they wanted to achieve with their design and so on. And I asked them, well, is this all? But the answer was just naming more technical criteria. So they were very much problem-solving focused. They were not really stepping back and looking at the project from a distance. So I felt the need to drag them out of this in order to reflect about what they are doing. So I began to challenge them by saying that the whole project is merely a vehicle for their learning. So and ask them what they themselves wanted to learn from the project, what else is in there. And the common answer was, oh, we haven't thought about it that way. And in this way, I got them where I wanted them to be. I got them to reflect about what they are actually doing in this moment. So in order to get them into this reflective mode, I asked them to write journals or keep a diary. But there was a great reluctance to write. First they said they did not know what to write and how to write, whether they do it rightly or wrong. Then they cited reasons for not writing as they were too tired, had too much to do, did not have the time. And on top, they were afraid of being assessed by the journals. Although I told them repeatedly that I wouldn't assess the journals itself. So only after a while, some students began using the journals more technically, remembering things from the meetings they had in their groups, and setting up an agenda. And then they slowly started to understand what sort of tool they had at hand. And this is really hard work to get them there and to get them writing. And one needs some luck finding one or two students who lead by example. After some weeks, their project work was running, and my idea was to let them improve their practice through an action research. I asked them to identify problems, and I still regret using the word problems, because problems are not welcomed. So one student said, we don't have problems, and the smaller ones are just solved immediately. And then another said, well, should we make up some problems to solve them? And I thought my whole idea of the lecture was falling apart. Well, in the end, we could identify some issues they could improve. And ironically, one of the no problems group had a severe internal conflict. And so they worked with the action research. In the second semester, when I started with 2 or 3 themes to investigate, it was much easier because they already knew a bit about action research, so they tried out ideas and moved forward. Finally, I want to reflect on the challenges. It is a very free and open approach, and one depends on the students and how motivated they are, and I was very lucky so far with my students. There is a lack of structure inherent in journal writing and action research, and as a tutor, I had to listen to what the students needed. Some needed more guidance, others enjoyed the freedom. There's a freedom of themes. The students can come up with any theme, and as a tutor, I have to learn about it in order to give them proper feedback. So this is challenging and great fun as well. And there is the dilemma of conflicts, I would call it. I was the first one to be approached when they had a conflict in their teams. And I have to admit, I wondered whether I was the right person and with the right skills to help them. Yet although the students suffered from the conflict, it provided them with a great learning opportunity. So I wished for some conflict, but not too severe ones. To wrap this up, there are challenges, but I enjoyed teaching very much. The students walked out saying they experienced a valuable perspective they didn't know before. They were more reflective and I hope more capable of coping with future and team and management related challenges. So I asked my students repeatedly for feedback, so I do now. I'm asking you as well. What ideas, what questions, what advice do you have to improve the learning experience of my students? Thank you for listening.
Do we have any questions this morning?
Hi, I have a question, Ellyn, if there's no more from the floor.
Go ahead, please.
Henning, Henning, I really enjoyed that. I enjoyed the honesty, both of emotion and of the process that you went through. And I thought it was really interesting how you spoke about how you addressed those challenges. And I wondered if your knowledge of the ethnographic process that you used in your PhD helped you to structure this work. And if so, what knowledge or learning from that did you think was most valuable for other people thinking about attempting this?
Henning, are you there? I've switched you to presenter, so you should be able to.
Hello, can you hear me now?
Yes, Henning?
But I can't see you. Why don't I?
I should be on.
I think we've just lost Kath. Oh, Ellyn, sorry.
So, hello. What may I proceed with answering your question? What was most useful? Probably the observing part of the ethnography, because in every meeting I try to see the little things that went on that are not too obvious, and then especially conflicts unfolded with a question I asked, because I observed some more minor things.
Okay.
Hello, everyone. I'm Henning Grosse. I live and work in Berlin.
It does that sometimes after a moment of time. So you were saying minor things, Henning. What type of minor things? Can you give me an example of that?
For instance, with this no problem group I mentioned, there was one student. She was very very motivated, and the others weren't so motivated, and just I spotted that in their conversations, and she always moaned a bit about or complained about others not doing enough, and I just raised this issue, and then it all broke loose, and the conflict opened up. So this was these the little things you usually go over, but I asked them, and then the conflict unfolded, and I could see them fighting it out and solving it in the end.
Brilliant. Thank you, Henning. It's really useful.
Roy, I think you had a question. Roy asked, is the student research-led teaching based on teamwork or individual work?
It's based on teamwork. So they only get assignments or tasks for the team. So they should work in a team together on the tasks I give them. So it's not individually based. Only at the end of the semester they are asked to write an individual paper to be marked on it.
Great, thank you for that.
Is this answering your question?
He said yes. Thanks.
Okay.
I'm not seeing any additional questions. Are there any other questions that we could have Henning answer? Okay, great. Well, thank you for those great questions. I think we can go on to session, the second presentation of the session, developing teamwork skills. AEC students write reflective journals and using action research. Isn't that, well,
No.
no, that was your, yeah.
Environment education. I am working with the co-authors listed here from London South Bank University and the University of Canterbury, New Zealand, for this ARCOM research paper. It is based on a critical analysis of two main literature samples that we collected using the Scopus as the main database. The first literature sample is based on how the higher education as a whole has been responding to the pandemic. And we also did a second literature sample of how the digital built environment higher education has been evolving in the recent years. So let's start from the first literature sample. As you can see, we basically focus on the higher education, including all the different subjects. And the second keyword is pandemic, COVID, or the epidemic. So the reference number was quite high, over 1,300. That was at the beginning of 2021. This number could be higher now if we do the same search in Scopus. Nearly 99% of the references all talk about the higher education since the outburst of COVID-19. But I pay special attention on the remaining 1%. These papers were really published even over a decade ago. They have been suggesting how the higher education could have the alternative methodology or the teaching delivery in case of any future epidemic or the pandemic. For example, in this study in 2007, it suggests the web-based environment or other pre-planning initiatives. So using the software as a text mining and visualization tool, we are able to visualize all the main author keywords in this overall literature sample. So because COVID-19 is the main focus of the pandemic, one of the main keywords. But let's look at other correlated or co-studied keywords, so we can see some other.
I'm not sure. Is the presentation still running? I'm not sure what happened.
Mobile learning, digital transformation, gamification, web-based learning, student or undergraduate. So these keywords, the size of the node shows the frequency, and the distance also can show the closeness of the of these keywords. Many of them are interconnected. So let's take a look at this corresponding table, also automatically generated from the inbuilt algorithm of the text mining software tool. It's called Voice Viewer. So these are the keywords, most highly frequently studied keywords. Same means a cluster. So these keywords from the same cluster means they have been co-studied in the same study, in the same paper, and the total link strength shows the importance or the influence, and the frequency shows how popular they are in the given literature sample. So we can see it covers some different teaching and learning methods, such as blending learning, or the student-centered learning, media-based learning. So a lot about the different teaching and learning methods, a curriculum, or student feedback, or the platform, such as MOOC, such as Moodle as platforms. Or here are some different topics or the subjects. So for example, is the sustainability or the medical. So that's just a brief overview of these keywords as corresponding to the previous mapped keyword visualization. So what we found out from this overall literature sample of the higher education is very few we can find from the built environment subject, very few. Among the few related or focusing on the built environment higher education, we used one example of the building information modeling or the BEAM education, focusing on collecting the student feedback of delivering BEAM during the pandemic in a remote approach. But there is a gap or the limitation from these very few education studies in the built environment. What we found out is there is still a lack of information of how the built environment education could be more proactive in designing and delivering the educational work to enhance the resilience, especially in responding to any public crisis like COVID-19, instead of just focusing on the reactive collection of environment education could be more proactive in designing and delivering the educational work to enhance the resilience, especially in responding to any public crisis like COVID-19, instead of just focusing on the reactive collection of student feedback. So now we move to a second literature using the same database, Scopus. We use the keywords related to the digital built environment, especially related to BEAM. So we can see other related keywords: curriculum, visualization, construction, or BEAM software tool, BEAM education, or virtual reality, virtual design and construction, or some discipline in the digital built environment, such as quantity surveying or construction management, or project, and some technologies like augmented reality, or some topics, sustainability also. So similarly, we create this table to show what are the clusters of the different keywords related to the BEAM-based digital built environment. So they can be categorized into different clusters and also the frequencies. And we add this item, it's called average publication here. That shows the recentness of each keyword being published in these studies. So that's the average year of publication of this keyword. So if we observe the average publication year chronologically, starting from as early as 2011, we can see in the early years, about 1 decade ago, the BEAM education has been more focused on the modeling or visualization, which we believe are the basic fundamental functions of BEAM later, around 2015, you can see the education has been highlighting more on the collaboration and integration. And also during the same period of the time, the published studies have been focusing on outcomes and assessment. And more recently, as we can see, the collaborative learning or project-based learning, experiential learning, these are the different teach and learning methods have been adapted or adopted in the BIM or other digital built environment education. Most recently, we can see BIM is no longer about, when we talk about the digital education in the built environment, it's not only about BIM, but also other interrelated technologies such as virtual reality, augmented reality, has been embedded or incorporated into the BIM education. So, based on the two literature sample review rated into the BIM education. So, based on the two literature sample review, and by observing and analyzing the signage reality, augmented reality has been embedded or mimic the other. So, based on the two literature sample review, and by observing and analyzing the synergy between the two literature sample, one is the higher education activities amid and post the pandemic, the other is a digital-driven built environment education. We summarize the 6 main categories to form the core of the concept framework in the built environment education resilience. These 6 categories are basically what the two literature sample have been highly focusing on, including the educational theories, such as the classic Bloom taxonomy. So the classic educational theory cannot be ignored, cannot be downplayed in the cutting-edge digital built environment education. Assessment, how we adapt the curriculum, the nature of the discipline, it's collaborative in the built environment, especially we consider there are different disciplines in the built environment. The teaching methods, such as experiential learning, the deliver approach, the remote learning, and never forget about student experience. And this framework needs more case study in the future to develop into to be adapted and verified through more case studies. And thank you very much for listening. Any questions are welcome.
Okay, so Roy, is the presentation completed now? I'm just waiting for Ellyn to come back onto the screen. Okay. So I'm not sure if Ellyn's having some technical issues. So while we wait for her to pop back on again, I just wanted to say that I really liked your presentation. I found the resilience framework particularly interesting, especially as you simplified it for a layperson such as myself. Ellyn's back, so I'll pass over.
No, go ahead, please.
And then I just thought it was really interesting how you broke down education as well, which might be something that's well known in those education researchers, but not for me. That's not my area. I wanted to ask to kick off with a question before anyone else came in, if that's okay. And I just wanted to ask, what were the implications for the lack of built environment specific research in this area? And if you're not able to speak with camera and mic, please do feel free to respond in the chat, and Ellyn can read that out for you. Okay.
Roy, I did switch you to a presenter, so she should be able to address the question verbally.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you for your great question. It's about the implication. So I did find out a very small percentage of the overall literature coming from the built environment sector. Somehow that reflects not only the education, but also the research and the practice. If we think about a lot of existing digital technologies or Industry 4.0, let's see, 3D printing or robotics or augmented reality or virtual reality, they are not actually originated from built environment. Rather, we are actually implementing these latest or emerging technologies from other industries like aerospace, medical, or manufacturing into the built environment or into the construction. So somehow the education reflects the research and development and the practice. So there is quite a lot we in the subject of, in the field of built environment, what we can map. I would not say copy, but I will say we map and implement what has been tried and proved effective into our field. So similarly also in the education. So we can see in the literature sample, so many other industries or subjects, such as medical, they have done quite a lot of advanced work also during the pandemic in promoting these different teaching and learning methods. So the first literature is really see how overall the higher education sector has been implementing or in responding to the global pandemic. And then I move to what we in the built environment that we can check from other subjects, other fields, and that map into the built environment. And the framework is actually the 6 key categories are the synergy based on, because both literature samples have been talking about these 6 main categories. So that's why I propose the 6 main categories in the very initial concept of framework. Did I answer your question?
Takes a minute. Yeah, you did, and very eloquently and enthusiastically. I very much enjoyed your passion there. Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Roy, I have a question. Where are you taking this research now?
Oh, this research in remotely, and now I'm located in London South Bank University. So I carry on some ongoing education partnership project related to the this digital-driven built environment. And I believe in the post-pandemic era, we're going to do some blended, like some physical teaching learning, but also we will not give up the remote teaching and learning, the experience that we have learned in the past years. Did I answer your question?
Sort of. What from this piece of research, where are you moving forward? What are you doing next?
Yeah, so I see, yes. Yes, so next is, like I said, we need some case studies from my own teaching or from my colleagues to test and validate and extend the conceptual framework. So that is something we need to test and validate from the concept into some case studies. If that address your question of where I'm moving to the future research directions.
Yes, that's great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Farah, I think you had a question.
Yeah, the hands rise.
Yes. I'm switching her to presenter so she hopefully can be on camera and speak if she'd like to. Farah, can you hear us?
Yes. I'm just wondering, from your research point of view, are you looking from the academics point of view, or are you looking from both sides of view, students as the producer for this collaborative learning, or are you looking just from the provider point of view?
Oh, I will say both. If the provider means the educator, yes, actually, student feedback is indeed one of the key categories in the framework. So it's really a feedback loop with teaching and learning. Also, I think one of the things I think is very important is to check the higher education and the industry needs, because we are talking about the gap, what the employer needs for student skills and the capability, and what we as higher education can bridge. So one of the ongoing work I'm trying to collaborate with colleagues from different countries is searching the skills. For example, the BEAM skills. If you search the LinkedIn, there are lots of job posts. They post all the essential criteria for the university graduates and the key job duties. So we can certainly do some also secondary data analysis of what are the key search criteria from the employer's point of view and what are the key duties. So how we can bridge our education to incorporate or to nurture students with the skills. So in some point, I will say we have to look at the students and their future employers to see how we can bridge it.
So you're looking at the employability aspects as well? When you...
Yes, certainly, yeah, employability into and reflect in the education.
All right, thank you so much.
Thank you. Any more questions?
Henning, it seems to be typing something. Henning, did you have a question? It says, I always struggle to get valuable feedback from students. What do you do to encourage particularly critical feedback?
I would say one thing is we all have the end of semester evaluation. That is really a standard evaluation. That participation is low, maybe also in different institutions, because it's voluntary, not voluntary. So many students do not really take part in the end of semester teaching evaluation. The other way is depends on the course or the module. I believe it means differently. Course in America means a module in the UK. So I'm talking about a course in America or module in the UK. So in this teaching, so for example, in my built information modeling, I would design somehow a reflective thinking as part of the assessment criteria. Like my previous presenter Henning said, there can be some reflective journal or the research report, so that somehow reflect the students' feedback. And as part of the assessment, that could encourage active or action-based learning for students. So that would be quite somehow consistent with Henning. Actually, Henning, you were the person asking the question. Did I answer your question, Henning? Thank you. Yeah, so there are both ways, I believe. Yeah, within the course of the module, and by the end of the semester. Of course, you can have some other informal workshop or the discussion, like a tutorial group during the semester. So they're both formative and summative. That's the term, I believe. Formative and summative interaction with the students. And another question: I am struggling to create critical thinking during collaborative learning due to lack of feedback. Yeah, I think that is to follow up the question from Henning. Depends on the different teacher and learning methods. Also, if we embed the classic education theories, like one of the critical factor that I mentioned in the concept framework is Bloom taxonomy. So we know students, teaching and learning have the different levels, 6 different levels, basically, according to the classic theory, from memorizing, understanding, applying, and then developing their own critical thinking and the reflective report. So that depends how you design the assessment tasks in your module brief, or I believe it's called syllabus in the States, or so we call module brief in the UK. So there is a ontology. One of my colleagues, it is one of the co-author, Brian Guo in New Zealand. He is developing one kind of the ontology. The idea is to have the sort of benchmarked standard across the globe about the digital built environment education, because right now all different universities may have quite different assessment criteria. So is there a way to have a benchmarked ontology? He called it ontology. So depend according to the classic theory, embedding the different levels of teaching and learning. So one thing is like how to motivate the students' active learning and critical thinking, or the reflective thinking following completing the task. Such as Henning said, you ask a student to write some journal or the reflective report. I'm sure if I answer your question, it's quite brief.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Oh, another hand raised. Let's see here. Henning, you have another question? Let me switch. I can switch you on to presenter again so we can see and hear you. You should be able to speak, Henning. Can you hear us?
Hear me?
Are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, the problem I had was conversations at the end of a lecture when you leave the room. But how do you create such a space where a student comes to you after the lecture and tells you, look, I didn't understand this and that, and you have this 5-minute chat after the lecture, and I think this is really difficult to set up in a digital teaching environment.
Okay, so yeah, if a student come to me ask, it's really difficult to follow. I had the similar experience both in before the pandemic, through the follow up. It's a small tutorial group with a team or with an individual student, or if it is during the pandemic, we actually recorded all the lectures. I would first ask the students to review what we have discussed in the class, and then follow up with it can be very specific questions or difficulties. So yes, I do need to spend my extra time to address that concern with a student. Yeah, if that answers your question, basically I do need to spend some time to follow up. So it's a good way to check the understanding and to see what I have been made it clear or not. Because in many cases, what I think is clear and straightforward may not be that clear and straightforward to the individuals. So it's a very good point to have built that rapport with the students.
And so for me, it's these informal conversations that are difficult to get running. So just when you meet them at the door of the lecture room, what you had done before the pandemic, and now we switch off the meeting, and then the meeting is over, and there's no space to ask another additional question informally. That's what I'm struggling with, because in these informal questions, I often get the most valuable feedback. And there's an honest question to ask, how can we get a space to get these informal questions where the threshold of asking the tutor or of chatting with him, and then you see what's coming across is provided.
Yeah, I believe the pandemic also created another chance of it making me more remotely available. So we don't need to come to the room and have the meeting. And yes, so certainly that it's not all negative. There's something positive that I learned from the pandemic. And also, students can record. They can record what I say. And also, it's important to make sure the informal inquiry should be also made available, if necessary, to the whole classroom, because I need to make it very fair. The information I told to one group should be made available to all the rest of the students, if it is really important for them.
Okay.
This is a very interesting question that you're bringing up, Henning, or comment that you're bringing up, Henning. Because I've experienced that both in the educational setting and also in my research. My research focuses on mentoring and mentorship. And the pandemic definitely affected it in very similar ways in the profession, because you're going from meeting to meeting to meeting, virtually primarily, and you're not having those informal discussions before the meeting or after the meeting that you would typically
have. Coffee with the student.
Exactly. You're not having coffee with the student, or, in a professional situation, you're not having coffee with your mentee or mentor. So I think we're really missing a lot of that tacit learning that goes on in both settings.
But Roy's right when he says it's easy. The access is easy, because sometimes students call me and or send me an email, and we have a meeting at 7 in the evening. We don't need to book a room in the university. I just sit here on my desk and we chat. Right. That's the advantage. So it's not all bad. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying, how can we address this problem? Well, what I said.
I think it's a huge challenge, and I think what Roy said is true, that it should be the information that you're giving or the knowledge you're sharing should be available to everyone in the classroom or everyone working for the organization that you work for. But, I don't necessarily think that was true before the pandemic or after the pandemic. Are there any other questions or comments? Oh, Roy, were you saying something?
Yeah, I think this problem exists also before the COVID. The only difference is now we have the different ways to handle that. The detailed way to handle it might be slightly different, but the problem itself is ongoing before the pandemic and after as well.
I agree.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Well, I think we're at the end of our presentations. Thank you very much to our presenters and great presentations. And I look forward to reading more of your research.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. Actually, teaching and research are indeed integrated in my view. That's what we call research-informed teaching and teaching-informed research.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you all. We'll see you at the next presentations.